welcome. You're watching Medically Speaking, and I am Meenakshi Uprethi. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has been an exceptionally difficult time, not just for you or for me, but for those who belong to the medical fraternity, including radiologists. Now, why are we talking today about radiologists? We are talking about that, interestingly, in the context of an innovation. Taking Make in India much beyond lip service is a team of AIIMS and IIT who have collaborated to reduce the contact between radiologists and anyone possibly who is infected by COVID-19. They have developed a remote ultrasound machine, a robotic arm. What is it about? How it could really revolutionize the healthcare in the country? We will be talking about all that and more with a team of experts, the brains behind this product. I'm being joined by Dr. Chandrashekhara. He's an additional professor, radiology at the Iit-Aiims Institute. I also have Dr. Chetan Arora, Associate Professor, Computer Science and Engineering at IIT Delhi. Dr. Kritika Ranganathan, she's an Assistant Professor, Radiology, also at AIIMS. Dr. Subir Kumar Saha, he is a Professor of Mechanical Engineering at IIT Delhi. Then I also have Deepak Raina, a PhD scholar from IIT Delhi. And one I forgot to mention is also Addverb Technologies, who's also in this collaboration. We have Suvayan Nandi, Senior Manager at Addverb Technologies from Noida. Welcome, all of you. And thank you for taking out the time to speak to NewsX. I'm going to start with Dr. Chandrashekhara. Dr. Chandrashekhara, my first question. Everyone, of course, is curious. They want to understand what is this ultrasound robotic arm. First of all, break it down for the layman, for those watching the show. What is the product, first of all, which you all have developed?
Well, ultrasound, as you know, is a very routinely used modality. It is a fast, accurate, and gives the diagnosis immediately. It is one of the most commonly used modality when you in the emergency hours. While doing the ultrasound, the doctor stands in close contact for a longer duration with the patient, which was of a less problem until this COVID-19 pandemic hit the world. We realized that close proximity of the patients with the healthcare workers tend to increase the chance of infection to the healthcare workers. Then we approached IIT Delhi to explore the possibility of the robotic system that could help us conduct this ultrasound remotely. So that what we can do is radiologist will be sitting quite distant from the patient, and we will control the robotic arm, which is placed just next to the patient, and probe will be connected to the robotic arm, and the images will be transferred live through the Wi-Fi so that we can interpret at the same time. The advantage being the lesser the human contact, lesser will be the chance of cross infection. And we'll be saving the lots of PPE kits as well. And if we can extrapolate the same concept to elsewhere, we can also do the telerobotic ultrasound quite distantly. These are some of the...
All right, you spoke about the advantages. You spoke about the genesis of the idea, which was going to be my next question. So why don't I take my first question to Dr. Chetan. Dr. Arora, as I said, could you break it down exactly what this robotic arm is, how it functions, what is the different distance between the radiologist and the patient, and if at all it at all affects the efficacy of the results or not? Dr. Arora?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So as Dr. Chandrashekhara was also mentioning, so one of the key requirement at this moment in the ultrasound is that the doctor has to stand by the side of the patient. Now, if you think of it, this requirement is basically arising because the doctor has to hold a probe on the patient. Otherwise, the picture as such, it's easier to transfer this picture through internet to another building, another room. So the picture or looking at the picture by itself does not require the doctor to stand. So the requirement is arising because the doctor has to stand, hold the probe and put a certain amount of pressure on the patient to get the picture right. So what we have essentially done in this case is that this probe is now not being held by the doctor, but it is held by a robotic arm. Now there is a doctor who is standing in this case a next room, which is safe distance from the COVID. But in future we can expand it to new building, new city also. The idea is that the device, I mean, the doctor has got a haptic device. I mean, that's what we call it. And the moment doctor moves this haptic device, the same functionality, the same commands are being transferred to the robotic arm on the other, which is on the side of the patient. Now, the critical factor in this particular case is also the pressure feedback. I mean, there is one thing that a doctor is moving the probe, which is by sitting in the other room. But the other important factor is that there has to be a certain amount of pressure that needs to be applied. I mean, if you put a pressure which is, let's say, beyond the patient's capability, then the patient will be hurt also. So that is what we try to do. So the robotic arm has got an haptic feedback inbuilt into it. So whatever the patient's body puts a pressure back on the arm, that pressure is transferred to the doctor's, which is again is holding that haptic device. So the doctor feels the same pressure in his hand. Okay. So an appropriate amount of pressure can be exerted through the robotic arm on the ultrasound probe, and an appropriate image is captured. And this image is then transferred to the doctor's screen. And just like you do a regular diagnosis by looking at the screen and the image, the same way you can do it. So the key issue here is one, manipulating an arm while sitting in a distance, and the other is transferring this pressure and force feedback both ways. So from patient to the doctor and doctor to the patient.
Right. So, of course, as far as a robotic arm is concerned, it's certainly, as Dr. Chandrashekhara also told us, highly advantageous both to the patient and the radiologist, increases the distance, while, of course, the results remain exactly the same. Dr. Kritika, do come in this conversation and tell us really what was the genesis of the idea? When did the research work on it start? Help us understand really the origin of the idea.
So, like it was just mentioned, we thought of this primarily in the context of COVID. Although the thought has come to us several times in the past as well, in relation to distance ultrasound, particularly in a country like India, where a large amount of the population lives in rural setting, do not have access to healthcare. And as we were mentioning, particularly for ultrasound, who does the ultrasound is a very important component. Like a CT and an MR is done by a technician and can be interpreted by an expert who does not need to be at the site, unlike an ultrasound which needs to be operated by an expert. So the genesis of the idea actually came from COVID, not only to cut down the operator exposure, but also because of the fact that inside COVID wards, often ultrasound is required. And usually a trained radiologist has a lot of other things to do. So they're usually in the department, which is usually not inside the COVID ward. There's usually a central radiology department, which has CT scans. And that's where a radiologist is usually positioned because they have CTs, particularly CT chests, to look into. So what we realized is that every time there was a call from a COVID ward, there would have to be a radiologist who needs to change into a PPE kit, go inside, perform the ultrasound, and come back. And what this entailed is that there was a long duration of a wait for the patient because you have to wait for the radiologist to finish off their CTs and then come. We were also consuming one PPE kit every time the radiologist goes in and comes out, which is a huge sort of resource that we're ending up wasting as far as the environment is concerned. There's a huge environmental burden when it comes to the PPE kits. So that was really the genesis of the idea. And like you said, we are testing it clinically currently. So our first set of clinical tests were not actually performed on patients. These are just performed on normal individuals, where we want to ensure that through extensive clinical tests, we will first ensure that there is no difference. I think you mentioned it very correctly. The first step is to ensure that there will be no difference at all between the kind of ultrasound and the kind of diagnosis that we can get from a handheld ultrasound probe or from a robotic ultrasound.
All right. Yes, please finish. No, please finish.
So the only thing I want to say over here also in addition is that I think credit to Addverb and IIT Delhi. I think the technology, when we saw the technology of the kind of dexterity the arm provides us, it's hugely different from what was available previously. So although, I think the thought has come to us a lot of times previously when it comes to the rural setting, but when we actually saw the kind of dexterity that this robotic arm provides us, it induced a lot of confidence in us to go ahead and be able to develop an ultrasound device like this.
All right, of course, all due credit to the brains behind it, you all, and also, of course, the collaboration with Advert and IIT Delhi. Mr. Nandi, tell us a little bit about Adverb Technologies. What's the role you played, and how was the whole experience of building this innovative robotic arm?
Yeah, so Adverb, I will just give you a brief of Adverb Technology. So Adverb Technology is a robotics and automation company, and we started in the year 2016. It was started by 6 people, and now we have more than 500 employees. Okay, so how it started was when Mr. S.K. Saha sir and Mr. Chetan sir came to us with this idea of developing a telerobotic arm in collaboration with AIIMS. So that time we took this opportunity to start the project under our CSR activity.
Okay.
So basically we have donated this robot, and we were responsible for developing the first prototype, and all the development and all the assembly was done in, and all the manufacturing was done in our plant only.
All right.
Yeah.
So, of course, as far as Advert Technology is concerned, you made the first prototype. But Deepak Raina, what was your experience working for this project like? You're a PhD student, I'm sure. Certainly, very exciting journey. Also, we speak about Make in India. That's something the government has also been pushing. It's you all were really making it possible, taking it beyond lip service, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it was an amazing experience, especially given the kind of team that we have. We have a startup company, we have doctors from AIIMS who were continuously giving us the feedback, and we have professors from IIT Delhi who were continuously giving us idea about how to add up innovations into the system and how to make this feasible whenever there are certain challenges. So this was a quite interesting experience for me, as especially when I was a PhD student, and it was also my research project. And there are many challenges that we faced into this project, especially when a human is involved into the environment of a robotic system. It becomes quite challenging to ensure the safety of a human as well. There are various components that are merged into this system, as Professor Chetan has mentioned, there is a force feedback. You need to ensure that there is a proper positioning and orientation of the probe, and the proper pressure is applied, and that too in a remote setting. So that brings some more challenge into the system, and I think we accomplished it, and we got the quality of the system and the quality of the ultrasound imaging comparable to the conventional technique. Another challenge that doctor face into the system is get accustomed to the system. Like they are used to do it in a conventional setting, but when you bring the robotic technology and robotic devices into their operation, it becomes quite difficult for them to start with, but with training they are able to get accustomed to the system. So overall we overcome all the challenges, and we made this system operational, and hopefully with more effort we will turn it into a clinical product and bring it into the market.
Right, of course, that's something which everyone is eagerly waiting for. Dr. Chandrashekhar, Dr. Kritika also spoke about how the plan is to take it to rural areas. What's the next step really after building this ultrasound robotic arm? What is now the next step or the next goal which you have in mind? Dr. Chandrashekhar?
Well, we are at a stage where we have developed the prototype. We have conducted around the trial on 20 volunteers. But there are some refinement and adjustments and improvements are needed from the technological point of view, so that we can be used in the over the patients. And if we can able to do refine the technology, then maybe now next step is to shift the robotic system into AIIMS and conduct the ultrasound examination over the patients. Next step is to do the ultrasound quite away from the our room, that is the wards are during emergency hours. Supposing a patient comes during emergency at night where doctors may not be available, availability of doctors may not be there, experts, there we can set up the robotic machine over there, and we can interpret the images right sitting at our home, maybe at our office. If we can, then further we want to move this technology quite far away to the rural setup as well.
Right, but Dr. Chetan, when we speak of course, moving this technology to the rural setup, how feasible is it? Because I believe there are some, of course, as Dr. Chandrashekhara also said, modifications needed. I don't think you all have applied for a patent yet, have you? And what could be the eventual costing you're looking at? Because these practical aspects really would matter a lot when you want to translate this into ground reality, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. So as Dr. Chandrashekhara also initiated at this discussion, although we started it with the COVID, but the eventual aim is that this is a, let's say, multi-purpose technology, and we can actually potentially apply it to rural areas, remote settings also. So, for example, there have been enough kind of cancers, for example, the oncology, where quick detection or early detection of the cancer is can actually mean a lot of things for the patient's life. I mean, if you detect it early, you can start the treatment early, and the patient can be saved. But as Dr. Kritika was mentioning, USG is one of the modality where the doctors, the expertise who is actually doing the ultrasound is extremely important. So which means that with this kind of a device, the telerobotic device for the ultrasound, we can actually make the expert available in the rural areas. See, unlike in the X-ray kind of technology where, let's say...
I get that. But then a lot, as I said, would depend on the costing, right? When you speak of rural areas, yes. I mean, the amount of spending even by the government is less than 1%. When we speak of our healthcare budget as well, people are also worried about if you want to take it to private labs, what would be... I know that you're yet to figure out these modalities, but what's the, a tentative cost line which you are looking at, or is it a little far from that?
See, we are a little far from that. You are right in that aspect. But even then, I mean, I can still assure you that the cost is going to be much lesser. So, for example, when we talk about the current surgical robots, even the basic surgical robot will start from few crores, actually. I mean, even the double digits in the crores. On the other hand, the kind of cost that we're expecting for the device like this or a robotic arm like this is actually few lakhs. So although we are still to reach that stage where we can actually say that, okay, now this is commercial available and this will be the exact cost for it, but that's the order of the difference that we are looking at really in this case. So we are aware about that, about the cost implication, and this is going to be a low cost device in that sense.
That's of course good to hear, even with the tentative ballpark figure. As you said, the amount difference is huge. And finally, I'm glad I can see Dr. Saha also joining us in the conversation, sir. So we were, of course, talking about the challenges you all faced while making it. We've discussed the technology and now, of course, the costing. Tell us about really the innovation in this. It's a first of its kind in India. Is it happening elsewhere in the world? Could you shed some light on the same, sir?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, similar attempts have been made elsewhere in the world, and the main challenge is what has been discussed in the earlier persons, that typically a robot, if you ask it to go from A to B, it will go from A to B, what we call the position control, and it will not bother if someone comes on the way, right? But here, first thing is you are handling with a human being. So if you ask to go from one part of the stomach to another part of the stomach, it will not bother, if something comes on the way, means your maybe stomach is little, up or down. So it will hurt you basically. That is one aspect of it. The second aspect is to get a proper quality of the images, what we are talking about, ultrasound images, you have to have appropriate force to be applied on the body. So what we call is the force control. So here the challenge is to be able to implement force and position together on the robot. So this is a commercial robot. So we had to understand that how the control aspects are done, and that was Deepak and Suvayan or their teams in Addverb. They made it happen based on the theories which has been learned over the years, in the literature. And Deepak, as a PhD student, has done that thing very well.
All right. I'm sure one professor is very happy with you, Deepak, but you did make one point about going the unconventional way. And Dr. Kritika, if you could come in here at this point of time, how difficult was it for doctors to, or for radiologists, to adapt to this? Of course, you were a part of the research, so I'm sure you are more open to trying out a new technology, but do you see other radiologists accepting something new, something innovative, because the unconventional path is always difficult, and convincing, of course, those who have been following a certain model for years to change their ways further more difficult. Is it, or is it not?
Absolutely. I mean, actually, I think that's a very, very good observation and a very good question looking forward. Actually, when we started off, to be very honest, we actually practiced this on pillows. So we didn't, I mean, as doctors, we tend to be a little bit more resistant to sort of trying anything on even volunteers, although we had their consent, we had an ethical clearance for it. But we did soon realize that it required a reorientation of our minds. It required us to sort of practice a little bit before we could actually go ahead and try and use it. So we had to actually train on pillows, and you're absolutely right. It's not like everybody will have the same amount of passion in terms of adapting, particularly because so India is a country where we have very, very few radiologists. So radiologists tend to be overburdened with whatever clinical work they already have. So to expect them to sort of adapt to a new setting is difficult. But having said that, this is a problem with all robotic devices and all new technologies around the world. So, for example, robotic surgery, every form of robotic surgery, the Da Vinci robot, for example, has a mandatory training period. So you cannot go ahead and use it without that mandatory training period. We will have to enforce something of that sort when we do sort of bring it into clinical practice. There will have to be such a mandatory training period. Having said that, again, radiology is one specialty which has always been at the forefront of development. It's literally just developed in the last 30 years, and so I'm sure people will be willing to.
Also, there is a necessity of COVID-19, the pandemic, and your personal safety, which certainly is going to be a driving factor. But Mr. Nandi, do come in here. So Dr. Saha was talking about the challenges. Of course, I'm not someone who understands all the technology, but it did look like that if there is a patient, and please feel free to correct me if I misunderstood this, if there is a patient and you're conducting an ultrasound, now a patient with a doctor, the comfort level is, I can tell my radiologist, okay, it hurts here, please move it here and there. But would that happen with a robotic arm? How do you plan to really, merge this human aspect as well? Or how have you already done it, if you have?
Okay. So the robot which we have has a force-torque sensor in it, which can get the feedback that how much pressure is being applied on the patient. So we already keep it under check that it is around less than 20 Newton, so that it doesn't hurt the patient. And apart from that, as a part of what we call as a safety integrity level, SIL 3 we have maintained, where we have a foot pedal with the doctor, and then we have a hand pedal with a hand emergency button with the patient. So whenever he feels any discomfort,
Yes.
any one of them can disengage it and can stop the robot.
All right.
So we have maintained that. Yeah.
Right. So, I'm going to give like the last words to Deepak, and I want to end it at a positive note, since, you are the PhD student who has joined us. Everyone talking about Make in India, you all have made it possible. Really, any message or any takeaway which you'd like to share with people as we all sign off from this show today, Deepak?
Yeah, so I think as our Prime Minister also keep mentioning that COVID-like scenario also comes with a lot of opportunities. And I think our project is basically a good example of that how we made use of that opportunity and come up with a system which was actually, and to do that, to do the study and do the development up to a level where we also did the volunteer trials at the AIIMS, I think is definitely remarkable. And I think we have done justice to whatever opportunity has been with us. And
All
I
right.
think we are,
So,
yeah.
I'm slightly running out of time. This is going to be my last question, but again, since it's really evoked my curiosity, Dr. Chandrashekhara, I want to ask you one very quick question. 20 volunteers, if I'm correct, is who you have tried this machine on. Are you looking really at bringing it at least to AIIMS and to try it, as you said, on actual patients already? Has it already started? If not, when do you plan really? What is the tentative timeline you're looking at, sir?
Well, the robot has been shifted to Addverb currently to further modify and do adjust some refinements. As soon as it is over, maybe we will shift again to AIIMS and do the trial. It will soon start over the patients. Ultimately, our aim is to take the healthcare to the people instead of people traveling from long distance to us for certain investigations. Basically, we want to take this telerobotic technology to the people, to the corner of the somewhere in the rural area, so that the even the common people can access the world-class expert opinion.
All right. Thank you all for joining us. Certainly a very innovative product, need of the hour. It's going to reduce really the contact between radiologists and the patients. Certainly it's going to help all of you all stay safe during this pandemic. Thank you. It's been rather riveting and a very informative conversation. I hope you all viewers enjoyed it as much as I did. Of course, as we end, same message, stay home, stay safe. Thank you so much for watching.